guests here, as well as we have some visitors who are associated with the non-communicable disease risk factor survey that was carried out, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But certainly want to offer apologies on behalf of the Honourable Premier and Deputy Premier for their absence. As you know, very busy times now, and they're both in other meetings and won't be able to attend our press briefing this morning. But I'll start very briefly with first a very good announcement through my ministry and obviously working with government on the non-communicable disease risk factor survey. The survey was carried out some time back, and we're very proud now to be launching the survey and issuing it to the public, the results of the survey. The heavy burden of non-communicable diseases, and with the increasing cost of medical care, I felt it was necessary for my ministry to carry out a STEPS risk factor survey in the Cayman Islands. This survey instrument was developed by the World Health Organization and includes a standardized set of questions used by all member countries. It focuses on obtaining core data on the established risk factors that determine the major disease burden. The aim of the survey was to gather proper baseline data on the health risks of the population. This information will determine what the specific risk factors of the population are, so that the ministry, and indeed the government and private sector partners, can adequately and appropriately plan and manage the intervention programs needed to address them. Some of you may recall that at the launch of the survey last year, I announced that this is the first adult risk factor survey that would be conducted in the Cayman Islands, and for that we are extremely proud. When we took office 4 years ago, it was one of our priorities, and so this morning I'm here to announce the major highlights and findings of the survey and to report that we have a lot of work to do to halt and ultimately to reverse this growing epidemic of non-communicable diseases. Some of the key findings from the survey are that 15% of respondents currently smoke tobacco, with twice as many males, 21%, and than females, around 9%. A large percentage, 67.1% of smokers smoke tobacco daily. This was much higher than females. This was much higher among females, with around 81.8% of those that do smoke tobacco, females that is, and around 61% of males smoking it daily. Smokers smoked an average of 10 cigarettes per day. 10% of respondents reported being exposed to smoke at the workplace, and a slightly lower percentage, 9%, reported being exposed to smoke at home. More than half, around 51% of respondents reported drinking alcohol in the past 30 days, with significantly more males than females reporting that same statistic. Although persons consumed fruit and vegetable on average 5 days per week, the number of servings consumed daily was inadequate. This is thought to be due to either not enough information being available to the public on what constitutes a serving size, and or that the cost of these commodities are prohibitive. Males are physically active more than females, with around 61.6% of males engaging in high levels of physical activity versus only around 34% of females. A large percentage, around 70% of respondents, are overweight and 36% are obese, a very alarming statistic. Although on average blood pressures were within normal range, this includes persons who are currently on medication. Around 25% of respondents had elevated blood pressure even when on medication, and around 15% had raised blood pressure but were not currently on medication. The survey identified the following risk factors: current daily smokers, less than 5 servings of fruit and vegetables per day, low levels of physical activity, overweight, and raised blood pressure. 39.2% of respondents aged between 25 and 44 years old reported 3 or more of these risk factors. 41% of respondents between 45 and 64 reported 3 or more of the risk factors, and of the total sample population aged 25 to 64 years old, around 43% reported 3 or more of the risk factors. And chronic diseases place a tremendous demand on our social welfare and on our health system. Almost 40% of our most productive workforce, between 25 to 44 years old, reported having 3 or more risk factors. Again, very alarming, and you can see how this contributes significantly to healthcare costs that have been growing in the country recently. With these findings, our focus must be on prevention. A unified approach is needed to turn the tide on these non-communicable diseases, and I certainly urge the private sector and health insurance providers to act as an agent, as an advocates for change and to encourage healthier lifestyles. Employers and employees must take responsibility for their health, as this effort will require strong multi-stakeholder support. While the government continues to do its part, it is not sustainable as healthcare costs continue to rise. We recognize that more must be done towards prevention, screening, treatment, and care, investing in the health of our people. I would like to thank and express our sincere appreciation to sponsors who assisted us with the survey: Aetna, Aon, BAF Insurance Company, Britk, Cayman First, Cineco, and Fidelity. Also thanks to Ms. Talbert, who's here with us this morning from the Statistics Office, and her team at Economics and Statistics, the members of the Non-Communicable Disease Coordinating Committee, chaired by Dr. Matthews, who's not here today, but Dr. Kumar is here with us. Last but by no means least, the team from the Caribbean Epidemiologist Center, or CARIC, for their technical assistance in providing training for the survey team and also for the implementation of the survey. It is certainly my hope that as you review the report, and encourage persons in the public to do so as well, and encourage the press to run as much information about this report, the findings of the report, because it's only through these these statistics being published that we become aware of how grave the situation is here in terms of the risk factors that I mentioned earlier, and encourage persons to know your own numbers individually, and work to improve those numbers so that we don't have persons as we said earlier, finding themselves having three of, falling in the category where 2 or 3 of the risk factors apply to them. So I certainly hope that you'll all make the choice to live healthier lives, empower and educate our children, adolescents, and young persons to make healthy choices. We all have a role to play in achieving our national vision, which is the vision of the National Health Policy, health and well-being for all in the Cayman Islands. As the great politician Winston Churchill said, healthy citizens are the greatest asset any country can have. Thank you. We'll now turn to Minister Glidden.
Sure. Thank you, Minister Scotland. Just want to offer my thanks and appreciation as well to the press and for the other members of the civil service for coming out and taking part in this press briefing. Just 2, I think, short announcements that I have. I need to announce that the Cayman Islands, the distinctive offerings of the Cayman Islands are now at travelers' fingertips with a new mobile application entitled Discover Cayman. The app provides visitors with information on a wide variety of topics about the destination in an easy-to-use interactive smartphone app that's available from Apple's iTunes Store. Discover Cayman streamlines general destination facts, maps, an event calendar, booking agent, social networking capabilities, and games into one platform for use as a convenient vacation planning tool, as well as a platform on which to share experiences. With these features and more, the Discover Cayman application offers a quick and convenient way to explore the Cayman Islands. With the Discover Cayman application, users can explore Cayman's hotel accommodations, restaurants, activities, dive operators, and on-island transportation. They can book a vacation directly from the app. They can learn more about Cayman's rich culture and history with fun facts. They can receive up-to-date news, events, and offers from the destination. They can interact with other visitors via Facebook, Twitter, Flickr, and YouTube. They can send e-postcards to friends and families. They can play an e-game to capture the invasive lionfish. The app also features a weather feed, polls and voting features, a partner directory, and island and dive maps. We invite visitors to discover the Cayman Islands with this innovative and practical mobile application. As we are constantly striving to present the destination in the most technologically advanced and accessible way, we hope visitors take advantage of the app as they book their vacation and once they are on island. Whether it's booking a hotel room or discovering the dive opportunities, we are confident that the app will make the task of exploring the Cayman Islands and its many attractions a fun, effortless, and convenient experience. So said the Director of the Department of Tourism, Mr. Shamara Scott. So, again, just a little highlight as to what we're doing in terms of using technology to continue increasing the guest experience, continue increasing visitor arrival numbers while reducing the cost of promoting Cayman and using technology to achieve that. One other point I want to mention is the continuing discussion on the cruise port facility. Thankfully, we have a bit of a better headlines in the newspaper this week. Last week, we had the headline saying that the cruise port was no time soon. And this week we have that the report is a foundation for the cruise port project. And I see that whoever, I'm not sure exactly what role Mr. Brendel plays, but he's gone forward to giving credit for moving the project forward. And he makes reference to the fact that there's a team of civil servants and consultants that have been laying the groundwork. And I think it's important for us to, as we did at the last press conference, acknowledge the hard work. I'm not sure exactly why the compass seems to find it so hard to give credit to the new minister that has responsibility, especially since we've seen a change and we've seen obviously a new process that has been followed in the last 4 months, and hopefully a process that will now deliver a facility that has been promised for the last 4 years. And we've seen more progress made in the last 4 months than we have seen in the last 4 years, except a lot of promises. And if I just read, if we move on from the front page story and get to the editorial, that we're saying essentially what they're asking for is a sensible submissions on a business case for the cruise port project. Just to make it clear who that is asking for, that's the government that's set their policy out to ask for that. And they said they're simply trying to put the country on the right track to enacting a fair and transparent bidding process. To the extent this effort can move the country's tourism efforts forward, now we applaud it wholeheartedly. With regard to this cruise port berthing issue, we believe the time for debate over who is at fault is officially over. It's time to roll up our sleeves and get it done. It says, thanks to civil servants for helping us to get on the correct path. And I just find it necessary to make note that these hardworking civil servants have been there, hopefully waiting to have an opportunity to interact and contribute in some way for quite a long time. And what has changed that has allowed that to happen is that there is a new minister with responsibility for that. And while I know the compass seems to have a difficulty with expressing that, I think the facts are obvious. And I thank the compass for at least recognizing the hard work that has been done and the openness and transparent process that the new government has committed to moving this project as well as the other projects forward.
Thank you, Minister Glidden, for that update on the project, and also and I do also concur with you on the hard work being done by yourself, guiding the ministry in getting the process off on the right foot now towards achieving the cruise berthing facilities. With that, now I'll turn to Minister Seymour for his update this morning.
Thank you, Minister Scotland. Thank you to the press and all that are here today. And just want to make mention of the now noted news of a young man who I want to thank the Compass for all the work they have done to expose this good news, and especially Mr. Fuller. And young man was the beneficiary of his records being expunged, and by a motion that I brought just last year, and to give a second chance to persons who had run foul of the law at a very young age, needed a second opportunity to either still go on to college, be able to get that police record, that clean police record, to travel with their family, to just get a job. These are the kind of motions that help a section of society that persons have probably never thought about in the past. Cayman Islands was one of the last countries to have such a policy to expunge records. And I've got a lot of calls, and I want to thank the Deputy Governor and his team and everyone who supported this from the start. some very good news, and hopefully we'll see some more positive news so that young persons can get a second opportunity to go on and live their lives like regular citizens and contribute to this to society, be contributing members of society. But very good news there. Again, thank the Compass for that, exposing that news there. This morning I'm going to discuss a few notes about, as everyone knows, this is Child's Month, and there's a lot of activities going on in this month, and we want to ensure that everyone is aware of what's going on this month to celebrate Child's Month. As you're aware, May is Child Month, so I want to share with you, the public, some of the upcoming exciting events being held for the rest of the month. With the theme of Care, Advocate, and Protect in mind, the Department of Children and Family Services has organized fun and informative activities in partnership with various government and non-government agencies. These are Thursday, the 9th of May, board games and trivia night at Book Nook Galleria Plaza from 6 to 8 p.m. A fun-filled night of games to encourage families to spend quality time together through positive interaction. This Friday, the 10th of May, there is an all-island dress-down day where donations will go to Feed Our Future to support their school lunch program. I encourage those who have not yet made a donation to do so. This is an important cause that we should all support. No child in the Cayman Islands should go hungry. Saturday, the 11th of May, Family Fun Day at the National Gallery from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is a partnership with the National Gallery to expose your children to their creative side as well as the enchanting exhibits of the gallery. It is geared to children ages 5 years and older. Children will create face masks in the art studio and then take part in an exploring activity throughout the gallery. Wednesday, 15th of May, marks the International Day of Family. These are two activities on this special day. Strong Families, Strong Cayman is the theme at the South Sound Community Center from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., where the Family Resource Center, the Counseling Center, the Caribbean Haven Residential Center, the Cayman Islands Red Cross, and the Cayman Islands Crisis Center will be holding an awareness and information sharing event on how government agencies and NGOs are working to address social ills and build stronger families. A pre-ordered lunch for $10 is available at this event. Crazy About My Family Olympics, events hosted by the Family Resources Center at the South Sound Community from 6 to 8 p.m. The focus will be interactive family game time with a competitive base on the Minute to Win It television game show. The grand prize is a family staycation donated by the Reef Resort. You can contact the Family Resources Center at 949-0006 for more information on these two events. On Saturday, 18th of May, Circle of Love Family Breakfast at the Marriott Hotel at 8:30 a.m. This event is sponsored by the Circle of Love Women's Ministry for parents to attend with their children. Guest speakers, Dr. Swan and Robinson, will be focusing on bullying, safety, and poisoning toxins. Admission for children is free. The cost of adults is $15. On Saturday, the 18th of May, the Children's Lukya at the International Museum from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The museum is celebrating International Museum Day, and the museum will be opening two exhibitions in the Changing and Children Gallery. These are Passing Through, Migratory Birds of the Cayman Islands, and Birdie the Passing Through. Exhibition will feature 3D models and migratory maps in the birdie. Children will see what it's like to be a baby bird. The museum is free to all. On Saturday, the 25th of May, the Cupcake War Culinary Competition at the Ritz-Carlton from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Sponsored by the Youth Department, the culinary team of the Youth Department will be involved and are inviting persons to cheer them on and sample their cupcakes. On Wednesday, the 28th of May, the Father and Child Evening. The purpose of this event is to encourage fathers to spend quality one-on-one time with their children at the dinner that will be hosted by the Department of Children and Family Services. On Friday, the 31st of May, International Stand Up to Bullying Day, hosted by the Family Resource Center in partnership with the Department of Children and Family Services. A leadership workshop for high school students is being held this Saturday, 11th of May, in preparation for presentations being held on the commemorative day at all high schools on Stand Up to Bullying. I encourage everyone to participate in the various activities planned for the month of May. As you can see, that was a mouthful. For more information, you can contact the Department of Children and Family Services at 949-0290. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour, for that update, and also for outlining this remaining schedule for Child's Month. I encourage members of the public to participate in many activities, very beneficial and positive activities for our children. And I note some in particular, father and child. I encourage more fathers to get out with their children and enjoy that activity. And also note the activity regarding bullying, and that's also a very relevant topic nowadays. So I encourage the public to come out, engage in those activities, and enjoy the wonderful activities being planned by the Department of Children and Family Services and the Ministry of Community Affairs as well. With that, that ends the updates that we have. Again, I want to thank those members who were here that participated and assisted us with the non-communicable diseases risk factor survey. I note, like I said, Ms. Talbert is here, Dr. Kumar, the Chief Officer from my minister, Jennifer Ahern, Sheila Watler, Mr. Joel Francis from the ministry as well, and Ms. Janet Flynn, all participated very actively and contributed significantly to the success of this survey. It is a survey that is, as we said, is done for the first time as a baseline, and we intend for the survey to be updated on a regular basis, probably in every 5 years, so we can see the improvements in the numbers that I mentioned, some of the very alarming numbers that I gave earlier on that we hope to see would come down in years to come in our population. But again, just to thank everyone, there are members here from ESO and others who participated, and without their contributions and hard work, this survey would not be possible. So thank you all for attending. Now we'll open it to questions. I'm not sure if there'll be any questions today, but I'll open it to the floor at this time.
You're not sure there's going to be questions? Minister Scotland, just checking with the comments from the government with regards to the DART Realty announcement last night with the canceling or stopping the negotiations on the Third Amendment for the NRA agreement, and they're hoping that this will quickly make the release of the PwC report come out quicker. Imminent has been a word we've heard often, so how soon will we see the report? And first comment on their stopping the negotiations on the Third Agreement, and then PwC report, please.
Well, certainly, I would hope that it wouldn't be inferred from the release that DART made that they were withdrawing from the negotiations as a means to get the report, the value for money report issued earlier. I'm not sure if I got that from what you said earlier, but and certainly I hope
they mentioned it in their release.
Yeah,
that's what they said in their report.
But I'm saying I'm hoping that wasn't the reason that wasn't the main reason they did it. If it's taken that way, then.
But obviously, with this coming out, there's no more I's to cross, T's to cross. We can release the report with just the first and second. You can just delete the rest of the stuff, and we should have it today.
So let me just answer the question. Let me just answer the question then. So, as the release said, DART has withdrawn from the negotiations in the Third Amendment. Government, as far as I'm concerned, are still willing to pursue or to complete the negotiations on the Third Amendment and conclude that. As we told you last week, the report that was being prepared was on the Third Amendment. I'm pleased to say that we have received that report now. We received it yesterday from PwC, which is a report of the independent review value for money report on the third, which includes the Third Amendment of the NRA agreement. So we are in possession of that. We have it electronically, and we are hoping to have a discussion with PwC this afternoon to make a formal presentation to us on all those findings, and then following that, we will release the report.
So the report that you're hoping will probably release with the Third Amendment still in it?
Well, yeah, because as I said, DART informed us that they have withdrawn from the negotiations on the Third Amendment. As I said, government is still prepared to conclude those negotiations, those discussions on the Third Amendment. Like I said from the beginning, we negotiated the agreement, the NRA agreement, and we've had subsequent amendments. It was value for money from the very beginning, and those subsequent amendments have been to try to bring things into the agreement that we certainly weren't going to achieve when the discussions on the main agreement had sort of broken down or had not been continued some months ago. So we were bringing some of those points in, as we mentioned before, also including things like the widening of Esther Tibbetts Highway. So we are still, government is still in a position to sit down and discuss the conclusion of the Third Amendment. But as you said, DART has withdrawn, and so but we have a report that has shown what the agreement is in terms of the Third Amendment.
I got to ask, were you surprised that DART withdrew? I mean, I know they want to continue, you guys want to continue, but were you surprised by the announcement in any way, shape, or form?
No, I can't say I was surprised, but
Why not?
Let's make sure that we get to where we were. As I think has been mentioned before, the Second Amendment would have been agreed before I was a part of the cabinet, right? And there were some things that even while the press and the public to an extent has been concerned about the question of value for money, and I think that will be addressed when the value for money audit is released for the Second Amendment. And as my colleagues have said, colleagues that were involved with the process during that time have said that report shows that there was value for money from the second report. Value for money is one criteria, but as a representative of the people, I also have other responsibilities, right? So I have to be satisfied that I think that we're getting the best deal possible. You all would have heard a lot of discussion that has been made in regards, and I'm just going to pull one component, in regards to the land at Salt Creek, for example, that at one stage was I think it's 69 or 72 acres of land that was there. I've never been supportive of that being involved, and as a part of the Third Amendment, that would have been removed, all right? There were other components of that had to have been negotiated. And so while there's always been the question in terms of whether value for money was achieved, and like I said, that will satisfy some criteria, I still have a responsibility, and there were other issues. One of those specifically being, which ended up being a stickling point, was the situation in regards to concessions for the hotel, right? And the fact that we weren't able to reach agreement on those concessions, I can't say I was surprised that DART was withdrawn and wanted to go back to the Second Amendment that had already been signed and committed to. So in answer to your question as to whether it was a surprise, if we're trying to get more, and DART doesn't want to give more, then no, I'm not surprised at all that they would want to go back to a previous agreement that they had.
Want to follow that?
I did, but I'm sure Wendy has some.
Yeah, similar question. If that isn't about value for money, then what is it about when you say that the concessions were in question? And also, what does this mean about the gazetting of the second part of the West Bay Road? Will that now be gazetted before the election or not? But can you define what you mean that you're saying that this presents value for money, yet here you are saying we weren't happy about the concessions and we weren't happy about the Salt Creek land.
Sure.
So we're now looking at an agreement that doesn't present value for money then?
No.
No.
Nowhere clearly. What I said is that the second agreement that had value for money, and because auditors who have been asked to provide an opinion on value for money decides that the government should or will still get value for money if it includes divesting 69 acres or 72 acres, I don't remember the exact amount, of land that it currently owns. While on paper, that could say that that's value for money. A concern that I will have as to whether the country should be divesting that asset, even if it does provide value for money, right? There's a larger consideration. And like I said, yes, the report that everyone was asking for and wanted to ensure it was value for money, but at the end of the day, if we're giving up $50 million and we're getting $50 million back, and the auditor is going to look and say that's value for money, I have many, and I assume I don't have to go into details of that, but I have many other considerations as a representative that I have to take into account. And so while we can satisfy the requirement in terms of value for money, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm still happy with what is negotiated. And that doesn't mean that I don't still have a responsibility as a representative of my people to try to get a better deal for them. All right? So, like I said, value for money is one component of that, but that doesn't mean that I should be satisfied as long as there is an independent report saying that there's value for money, so I should go forward. And so what you will see is a value for money with the Second Amendment, but what you'll see is an improved arrangement for the people of the Cayman Islands attempted to be achieved in what was negotiated as a Third Amendment. And the fact that that wasn't agreed for then puts us back in a position that we now are in discussions about. But in terms of your question as to what ends up happening with well, before I move on to that, let me just ask, did that answer the question about if it's not value for money, what is it? It's basically saying, regardless of its value for money or not, before I'm willing to move forward, I think the country should be getting a better deal, even more value for money.
Okay. And tell me where that leaves with the concessions, because you're saying that you weren't happy with the hotel concessions either.
Right. So where that leaves is that we have a second agreement that was signed, and we have a third agreement that was negotiated with significant changes up until this point. And I think it's fair to say that there was one sticking point in terms of the third arrangement that we haven't been able to agree on. All right. So we still feel that the process is still one to be discussed and negotiated.
The road is that.
You want to mention what that one sticking point is?
The one sticking point was to do with the hotel concessions.
Be more specific about what, was the 50% too much? What?
Go for it.
I can try to explain a bit. When we started to, if you recall again, when we started negotiations on the FCIA at that point, which was way back in 2011, it would have been at that time, there was going to be the almost immediate stimulus by starting the construction of the hotel. To date, obviously that hasn't started. There's been work on demolishing it and planning and deciding what brand it's going to be and those different things. But to date, the construction of the hotel has not commenced. At that point, the concession package that was put together for that was slightly different, structured slightly differently, because we said if you're going to start the construction of a hotel almost immediately, then giving the package in that format was going to be value for money, but also a good thing because we're going to see the jobs and everything else happen right away. To date, that hasn't happened. So what we've said in the Third Amendment is we went back to the table and said, listen, let us look at restructuring the package specifically for the 7 Mile Beach Hotel, which is a proposed hotel on 7 Mile Beach, and that's become the sticking point, basically.
So you wanted to cut down the time frame?
No, it's how we would put the package together in terms of the total concessions, not necessarily the time, but the total concession package for the SMB hotel.
I think you'll be able to see when you do the comparison between the Second Amendment and the Third Amendment, right? And you'll be able to see what was there, and then you'll be able to decide. Like I said, a significant portion of those changes were agreed by both parties. The aspect of the concessions for the hotel was basically a sticking point that was there. The other ones, interestingly, were negotiated and agreed.
Road part.
Sorry?
The road part. The second part of the gazetting of the closure of the remaining part of the West Bay Road.
Well, there is a so let's just make sure that we're clear. The first NRA agreement prior to the end amendments made a commitment, and there were commitments on both parts, both sides of the negotiating table. So negotiation commitments for road closures and negotiations for starting of the hotel within a certain period of time, and from when was that? 2011.
December 2011.
So December 2011, there were some commitments made at that stage that required closing. So government has an obligation to close and gazette the road. as well as the developer has an obligation to fulfill certain obligations that were there. What we're proposing to do is negotiate amendments to those commitments, and we feel that we still have a requirement or responsibility to negotiate those, and until those get to a stage where there can be an agreement, then there's going to be challenge in fulfilling those obligations, because those obligations are expected to change on both sides as we go forward. So when we say that we're still expecting discussions and negotiations to take place, then it's convenient to say, but quite a few things have changed and been agreed since the Second Amendment, and so is the obligation the full requirement of the Second Amendment, or is there going to be an amended Second Amendment that doesn't quite reach the Third Amendment? What we've agreed to do is we've agreed to release the independent reviews of the Second Amendment and release the Third Amendment as well as the independent reviews of the Third Amendment, and then the public can see. I think it's a safe bet to accept that this is going to continue past the May 22nd.
That was just when I wanted to clarify. I mean, when you say negotiations will continue, presumably that's after the election.
Sure.
Okay. And also, Minister Scotland, when you said first off that you didn't think, I don't remember what you said exactly, but you didn't think that the release of the report had to do with why DART had pulled out of the negotiations. What can you clarify that, or what did it have to do? What was your understanding of what this did have to do with?
What I just said.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what he just said is.
Yeah.
I mean, because there was.
But we just clarified it by saying that there's a sticking point with the on the concession package for the hotel. That's the remaining sticking point. I mean, I was a bit facetious when I was saying it originally about the that I hope that wasn't the reason they pulled out, but it's just that it read that way in the reporting by what Jay said in his first question. So I just want to clarify that I didn't know we inferred that's what it was either.
Okay.
So, and we just clarified what it was, in fact what it is. Sorry, in terms of the sticking point on the.
I think it's important. I mean, I expect the press, and obviously we're respectful of the press in there, but I mean, you would never have believed or been able to make an interpretation, I'm sure, that two parties are negotiating. They're negotiating for 6 months. A report that has been talked about for a year hasn't been released, and one side says, okay, I'm stopping now because I want to fast track the release of a report that has been waiting 6 months to go forward. And you would have actually assumed in some way that was due to the only reason for that happening was to try to facilitate that report. I mean, when my colleague said he was being a bit facetious, I think that was fair based on that question. I don't think that was a very...
And so, after you all go through this, are you going to release the PwC report tomorrow?
That's the plan now. As I said,
Release it on Friday.
Yeah, we have a hopefully a discussion with them this afternoon. They go through the main points in the review, and then we could be free to release it.
Okay, and then just one last question. I have to ask this one. If I'm DART, or I'm taking DART's view on certain things, I might ask, what's really going on here?
What's really going on?
We had hold on. I'm sorry, Minister.
Sure.
Just we had a Second Amendment. Now, from what I understand, what you said, we're going back from a couple of the things in the Second Amendment and trying to change them in the Third Amendment. And it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks before an election, and we're going to release a report with the two different amendments and see what's better for the Cayman.
Sure.
What are you guys really doing here?
Well, it should be pretty clear. What we're doing is we had an agreement that was signed, and then it was amended twice, and then there was 6 months of negotiations on both parts to come with a further amendment, during which time significant changes and amendments were agreed. So there was a lot achieved during that period. Now, because everything couldn't be agreed as to what was to be achieved, there's been a proposal now to say, well, let's forget everything that we've agreed. Let's take everything that we removed and everything we've added back over for that 6 month period and go back to an agreement number 2. The reason why we were moving on to agreement number 3 because there was a discomfort on both parties' sides. All right. So again, that question, I don't think that's hard to understand. We spent 6 months trying to get an agreement, an amendment to that, and when we couldn't get an amendment that both sides agreed to, one side says, okay, I want to withdraw and go back to number 2. Now, I think it would be safe for you to expect that the other side, who felt that number 2 wasn't a place that they were comfortable with and who had made significant changes trying to get to a position to be agreed at number 3, would not also be comfortable going back to number 2, because if they were comfortable, they would have never moved from that position to begin with. So it would seem pretty obvious to me. I'm not sure exactly where that confusion would lie, but hopefully that explains what it was that we were trying to do. We're trying to get an even more improved, and the concern that the press has always asked, well, hold on, if number 2 gave value for money, why didn't you release the report? And you must be trying to get something else in number 3. So what we're saying to you now is that, not correctly, the assumptions that had been made by the press that said you didn't get value for number 2, you will now get to see whether you got value for money for number 2 or not. And after having seen and hopefully being satisfied that number 2 actually gave you value for money, you will also see that the government that is committed to representing its people were still trying to get even more value for money with number 3. And the fact that we weren't able to achieve that now puts us in a position that we have to decide how to go forward with that.
Can I ask a quick question with regards to the timing on this?
Can I just check, because I just want to make sure.
I apologize.
You know, I have some I want to make sure that there's no issue with the Compass question on, hopefully that clarified that position. Is it clear? Yeah? Good. Okay.
Just with timing wise, it seems the cabinet just approved the Third Amendment last week before last, and now darts are pulling out of it. So it seems to me that if you guys got that close that you've approved it, although you announced it back in February of this year, why now? I mean, they had to have given you some sort of indication as to why they're doing it now, besides the press release that we got. So,
yeah, we're clear that the reason why DART is pulling out is because they don't agree with what we're proposing and what we've agreed to.
And what we approved.
And what we approved. So
what was approved in cabinet was the agreement with the condition that some of these concessions be revised, and that's what they obviously they're not in agreement with. And as I said, that is the crux of the matter, really, that around that one sticking point, and that was approved in cabinet. They've said they would like to go back to the Second Amendment. I mean, that's as Mr. Glidden said, that's normal in the negotiation process. As we said, we produced an agreement that was value for money after the First and Second Amendment, and because for various reasons, as we've mentioned before, we're trying to gain more value for money for the country, more value, I should say, and benefit for the country out of this agreement. As we still see it as a very important agreement for the country going forward in terms of our economic growth and development, with what we know is a very committed developer in terms of DRCL, and so we're trying to gain some additional benefit to the country in the very short term and medium and long term as well. But they're not in agreement with where we are at that point. And if it means going back to the Second Amendment, I think, as Mr. Glidden said, I think the discussions will continue, and we'll still, whether we end up back at the Second Amendment or hybrid, something between the Second and the Third Amendment.
But in the meantime, the important thing that the press has been asking for is the report.
Right.
That's it.
We would like to see the Third Amendment.
And we'd like to see the third, so we can compare. But
we
the
will
question I want
we'll
to
give
try-
you the third, but it's not approved.
The report would have the
This
Third
is the
Amendment.
issue. What was it that you had agreed about the Third Amendment then? Because you all took something to cabinet that you felt that you were in agreement with DART.
Correct.
But, I mean, you don't
Except
agree
that-
on your own, do you?
Except that we had discussed and the condition we put on it, because obviously we were trying to ensure that the Third Amendment was signed, because it had been.
I was going to say, was the Third Amendment ever signed?
No.
So it was never imminent,
Not
really, then, was
no,
it?
signed by, wasn't, no.
The report was imminent.
Right,
But the
the Third
agreement
Amendment was
wasn't
never signed. What was taken to cabinet was the Third Amendment. The cabinet paper was taken with the Third Amendment in it,
Right.
and the condition that was approved on was that the concession package would be revised. Obviously, when that was approved, that was presented to DART then, and obviously the discussions had been taking place. They knew our position on that from earlier. We approved it in that way, and it was for them then to agree or not to agree on that.
So just so we're sure, because the word imminent has come up again.
I didn't say it this morning.
So let's just make sure that we're clear on, let's make sure we're clear on how we got to imminent, right? So we've been being pressured for a long time, and we've been saying that while we're satisfied that the Second Amendment gave value for money, right? Again, my colleagues have been involved in it. They've discussed it. There was a report that provided that, right? Our concern has always been, let's get the finalized Third Amendment so we don't confuse the issue, and also get value for money for that, all right? As we negotiated and agreed, the individuals, the company that was doing the value for money audit or the independent review, all right? We would have to keep updating them because we explained to them we didn't want them to be starting at the completion of the Third Amendment. So as per agreement, we would go back to them and say, these are what the two parties have agreed, all right? Expecting that we were going to reach an agreement on the Third Amendment and not wanting to have to come back to the press at that stage and says, oh, we've just reached agreement on the Third Amendment and now they're going to do the review of the Third Amendment. So it was a simultaneous process that was ongoing with the different changes that were being made, right? Still expecting to reach an agreement on that and then being able to come and say, yes, we reached agreement and now you have a value for money report on the Third Amendment, all right? So what you will now see is what was expected to be an agreed Third Amendment and the value for money based on that having been agreed. At the last point, we weren't able to reach agreement. So that fell away. The work had already been done because we were proposing to release that. And the work had been done on the Second Amendment as well. All right? So because we now have both of those amendments, even without the Third Amendment being agreed, all right, we've said, fine, we've been promising this. We now aren't going to get a Third Amendment. So we're not going to get a Third Amendment and a value for money report done on the Third Amendment because it hasn't been agreed. So let's give that out as well as the value for money on the second. And that's the best that we can do.
So the concessions aspect is the straw that broke the camel's back, per se. And so here we are, you guys have been negotiating about this concessions, because it seems like everything else would have been fine.
Not really.
Okay.
There's ongoing negotiations that required quite a bit of time to reach to that point.
Okay.
All right. So we can't say that the negotiations have only been for the concessions.
I understand.
Right. That's the part that we weren't able to reach agreement with. But other aspects have been negotiated and agreed over a period of time.
So how far apart were you guys?
About
The concession.
about $16 million, I think.
How many?
16.
1.6
Yeah.
million.
1.6. Is that number okay? Somewhere
I
around there?
think, yeah, I think that's
Somewhere around there. You think that was a big number?
No, I'm just curious.
No, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering from a perspective. It's all about.
I mean,
It's a subjective discussion, right? So,
Well, I know, but
is 16 a big number?
The deal's worth billions? Hundreds of billions?
Sure.
So it's 10%, 1%, 5% of the whole deal?
Well,
I mean, the way sorry, just to quickly, the people I feel the people are going to look at this and say that you pushed it away from because you were too hard on the negotiation. Whether you take that as a good thing or a bad thing, that's your impression.
well, it's not really my impression. It's the public that we represent.
Yeah.
So the public that we represent will decide, and that's why we said we're quite happy to deliver it and allow the public to decide. They will look and they will see what had been agreed, and they will see whether what had been agreed was reasonable, right? Taking account value for money, and then they will look and say, well, you know what? I think that the people that represent me asked for too much, and that they should have agreed, right? Because the benefits would have been greater. And that's the risk that we take. And on the other hand, we take the risk that if we had not pushed for that and we have gone forward, that they would have said you didn't push for enough. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
So that's why I asked you the question. It's subjective. It's going to be totally dependent on where you sit. And some people will take that view. I have a responsibility to do what I think is fair, and I'm now willing to make the public look at that. And guess what? After the 22nd of May, whoever the administration at that point will look and say, as you know, there's some partners out there who said, you know what? We think this whole deal should be renegotiated. We think the West Bay Road should be reopened. We were moving forward, and we were hopeful that we would be able to get an agreement. But so far, we haven't been able to do that. And we've done our best to reach that agreement. And now we're willing to give that information to the public and make them make their own call, like you said. And we're sure, having been in this game of politics for a while, some people will think that you did too much, and some people will think that you didn't do enough. And that's just the way it works.
two questions that will relate to this. Post-election, are the three of you willing to say now whether you will support a UDP government led by McKeever Bush if he gets the largest group?
Is a question related to this?
Because that will obviously be dependent. The whole issue of this DART agreement will depend on who gets elected to office afterwards. So I'd like to know whether you will support a UDP government led by McKeever Bush, given what happened in December on the 23rd of May, if he comes to you and asks. Also, the port. It's a similar situation that we appear to have here, with an agreement that was signed and then an agreement that isn't signed. Alistair Patterson says that there is another agreement. The mystery agreement does exist, and he says the lawyers have it. So have you been able to find that?
No, we haven't. As far as the lawyers will say to us, the only agreement that they have is the one that they held and that was released. Remember, that document that got leaked was released by the lawyers for the Port Authority. The lawyers for the Port Authority and the Port Authority, who asked me to come to a meeting, explained very clearly that the confidentiality and secrecy to that document was due to the fact that there was only one copy in existence, and it was given to the charge of the lawyers to maintain that confidentiality. It was released on the Thursday prior to Good Friday to my ministry, we had been announcing that we were searching and trying to get access to that agreement. It was released, and the lawyers who had been given responsibility for its confidentiality asked for a meeting of the Port Authority because they wanted to make sure that they were not held responsible for having leaked that information. All right? So I find it very surprising that the lawyers who expressed that amount of concern, who even requested us to be able to do an audit to see if we could determine where the leak had been, that they were worried about a agreement that had been subsumed by a new agreement.
So there is no, the lawyers don't have this third, the second agreement. I'm getting them.
You can ask them. You can do
Use the mic.
you can do a specific request to them, but I can say to you, as per our requests for the agreement and for the documentation, the lawyers for the Port Authority released that document to my ministry, right?
And you're talking about the leaked document, that was signed.
Right.
And the lawyers say they have nothing else.
I honestly can't say to you whether I've asked them if they have something else, but I would have to assume if we ask you for the agreements that are there, you release the agreements, and then you come and express concern about those agreements having been leaked and wanted to make sure that you're absolved from being associated with that leak, that those would have to be the documents that are the most current that they're worried about. I wouldn't think that they're too concerned if they were old documents that had been passed by new documents at the time. But like I said, you can ask because there appears to be some confusion with that. But as far as we're concerned, that's the only agreement that was signed, and the government, that's really important for the government standpoint, because from a liability standpoint, right, we've been asking our chief legal advisor to determine what, if any, liability the government may be exposed to based on the commitments made in that agreement. So like I said, if there is something new that removes some of that liability or removes some of the obligation that we made, we're anxious to see it, but no one seems to be able to find it.
And just picking up on the aftermath that people are trying to predict, and I don't think anybody's been successful yet in predicting an election in 100% entirety. I think persons have to get themselves elected first. No one knows who's gonna be elected, and if the country in itself chooses, from what they've heard from presentations throughout the campaign, a UDP-led government, or they chooses a PPM-led government, and the PNA is still involved there somewhere. There's no group that has 18 members representing all districts, so definitely there would be some backbench or something that would have to work with the government to see the country's wishes true. And according to the Constitution, if you get about 10 members, then you have enough to prick the premier. So definitely, if we come in and find a situation, if we're elected, if you're successful in the next election, and we find that they select the UDP government as 10 of their members, then what we have to do is to do the wishes of the districts that we'll be elected by, and to work with these people to try to achieve and expose anything that we need to expose, and to applaud anything that is made good from whatever government is selected, and ideally we think there's going to be a coalition government. We're only 5. The country in itself has seen that in the last 4 months, since December, if it's 5, I apologize, that even with the quadpartite type of government that we had in the LA, we were able to bring some of the most difficult bills, some bills that were there for 15 years that were not able to get agreement from all parties on, even when they had the partisan structure. And we were able to do it in the quadpartite system that they had, or type 4 different elements of the parliament that we had just a few months ago before being dissolved. The country sees that was able to work. It's worked in the past before parties came into place, where persons got together and made good for the country. So definitely, we will see what the people of this country, they are very smart. Remember now, the electorate of this country, last election, and I'll end with this, they saw that the PPM government had went and negotiated a constitution, and at the election approved the constitution, said they wanted that new constitution, but didn't elect the PPM as the government. So we have a smart electorate. Thank you.
Mr. Simard, can you answer the question, which was, will you, if you are in a position, support a UDP government led by McKeever Bush or not?
That question was answered. If they have 10,
That's a yes then.
if they have 10, then we have to.
That's a majority.
That's not-
I asked, would you
no.
support a UD, if they are the largest group, will you support him in order to become a majority?
Well, I don't have to support them if they have 10.
That's not my question. That's
Well,
my
you
point.
need to reword
if
it. Yeah.
Mr. Bush has the largest group, not necessarily the majority, if he has
Okay.
8 candidates,
Okay.
and he needs you and Mr. Scotland and Mr. Glidden, I'm asking, will you support a UDP government led by McKeever Bush?
Well, that's a good question. And what I would say about that, me personally, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm glad you asked it. What I would do is go back to my constituents of Borden Town, have a big meeting, and let them decide what we do.
When I can clearly say this, right? I think I already demonstrated my position on December 18th, between December 11th and December 18th, when we asked the then Premier to step down as the Premier of the country, and I think that my position hasn't changed from then. I would only talk about the story from the Bible of Sodom and Gomorrah, when they were leaving there and they told them not to turn around because they turned into pillars of salt. So I wouldn't be turning around from what I did on December 18th, and so I can clearly say that that you know, if either of the large groups get enough to be the Premier, then for one of them to be the Premier, then that's fine with me. What we've said and what my position is that the 5 of us formed an alliance which would be willing to work with others to form the government. Who becomes the leader of that group? Who becomes the Premier out of that? Or after the election is yet to be seen, because it's quite clear that neither of those big groups, the PPM nor the UDP, are going to bring 10 or more elected persons to the table, and so there will be a coalition government being formed. I can clearly say that, as I said before, that my support for the then Premier was gone or diminished or lost on December, in the period in December, and I'm still of that position at this point.
So that just leaves me. But I can't say that I'm surprised with your question, and actually I have no problem with answering. I'll just take my time to answer and to make sure that it's clear. So, after significant consideration in December, I made a decision that the person Mr. Bush, my colleague, my friend, that it was not in the best interest of the Cayman Islands for him to remain in that position after having been arrested at that stage on criminal charges. Since that, it was not an indication of his innocence or his guilt. It was simply saying, in the interest of the Cayman Islands, I had to choose. Many people see this as a stabbing in the back. I said I chose the Cayman Islands before my friendship and loyalty to McKeever Bush, right? Since that time, nothing has happened to improve the situation. In fact, he's now, since then, been actually charged with 11 charges that will go to court sometime after the election on May the 22nd. And so I think it's pretty obvious. If I made a decision in December that said I didn't think it was in the best interests of the Cayman Islands for Mr. Bush to be the premier during that time, after only having been arrested, now that he's been charged, it should be pretty obvious that nothing would have changed my mind that would make me be supportive of him being back in the position of premier prior to him being found totally innocent of any of those charges. And so after May the 22nd, if that is the decision, if the people have selected the UDP as a majority, then I would not be able to go against my conscience to go back to the position that I found unacceptable for the Cayman Islands prior to December. Is that clear? Good.
I have one
Right
other
there.
question in a different context. Since you all have said that about a McKeever Bush-led government, what about the Coalition for Cayman? We've heard discussions that the PNA group has been in, or we've heard talk that there has been discussions between the PNA group and members of the Coalition for Cayman. I can't help but noticing the candidates sort of line up quite well between what you guys are running in the districts and what the Coalition for Cayman has in the districts. So what are those discussions? I mean, would you all accept a coalition government with the Coalition for Cayman, given that neither of you have a full slate of candidates to run the government by yourselves?
So,
I mean, I could clearly say again, I think that, let me repeat again, I think that the PNA candidates, the People's National Alliance candidates, the five of us who are running together, present the best alternative to continue to run this country, to continue to govern this country, given what's happened in the past 5 months, given the strong foundation that we now find ourselves on in terms of recovery and moving forward with the infrastructure projects we've talked about, with other things that are going to stimulate the economy, with the education plan, the national health policy, various policies and plans we put in place. Tourism is moving ahead. The various initiatives through the ministry, through Mr. Seymour's ministry, and so I believe that come May 23rd, that the prospects of forming a government, I believe we find ourselves in a very strong position. As I said earlier, I don't think either of the two established parties are going to find themselves in a majority, and you're going to need numbers to make that coalition, and I believe the best numbers available there, the best persons available there in terms of experience, leadership, vision, and so on are the People's National Alliance group, and we will find ourselves in that group forming the government for the country going forward. We certainly will be able to form it ourselves. Now, talking about the coalition candidates and not in any way being in any way disrespectful of their professional accomplishments and so on, but I don't find any of them that would be in a position to be, say, the premier of the country, for instance, because obviously we have elected experience amongst the five of us that none of those persons running for office have now. While they're very successful business persons, that's only but a part of being an elected member and a member of the Legislative Assembly, a member of cabinet, and for that matter, being the premier of the country.
I mean, Brent, I don't know if you need answers from each one of us, but I mean, I think Minister Scotland has answered in terms of you asked about the numbers. I can say to you with all sincerity that the numbers as it worked was simply a coincidence. I know coincidences are hard to accept, but as far as your comments based on the numbers that were there, I can say that there was no discussions prior or decisions that were made prior to in terms of strategy. I can say that I've had discussions with I think all the members, independent members, some C4C members, some PPM members, and some UDP members, I've accepted that there will be a coalition or an alliance or whatever we want to call it after May 22nd. And if I'm privileged to have been elected by the people of West Bay, I commit to working to form what we will feel is the best government of those who are elected, right? And whatever role that may be. There is a possibility, you have a government and you have opposition, and whatever that role will have to be, then we'll have a responsibility to do that. But in terms of discussions or agreements, we all feel that we put together an alliance. We came forward. We have a working relationship. As my colleague said, we have significant amounts of experience in the different areas. We think that we would be an asset to any other grouping, especially any grouping that would be candidates with lesser experience than ourselves. But again, we'll have to wait to see what the people will have decided. But working with members of the C4C or working with other members elected to the Legislative Assembly, I think our group has demonstrated very clear that we're able, committed, and willing to do that in the best interest of the Caymanian people.
I think we want to wrap up fairly shortly. So if no more questions, again, I want to thank all members for coming this morning. I want to again thank persons here from the Non-Communicable Diseases Survey, again, for being here and taking your time. And also just to mention that our next press briefing will more than likely be on Tuesday afternoon, as it may be the last one we have before, as a group before the election. But please, we'll send out information about it early next week. But it's more than likely it'll be on Tuesday afternoon following cabinet. But we'll just let you know some more about that later on. Again, thank you all for coming this morning, for the very probing questions as usual, and we look forward to seeing you at the next briefing. Thank you.